Oh, that's right. They announce it now.
Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. Before we get started, just let you know that JoAnna is going to do a presentation, and then afterwards we'll have a discussion. Feel free to unmute or type your questions in the chat.
And there are a couple of exercises in the middle, so we'll get a little of that done in the middle.
Oh, good. So a little interactivity. That'd be great. Okay. JoAnna, we're pleased to have with us today JoAnna Brandi. She's the author of 2 books on customer loyalty. She's a certified happiness officer through Florida International University and a graduate of Dr. Martin Seligman's Authentic Happiness Coaching Program. She's also the author of the illustrated book, 54 Ways to Stay Positive in a Changing, Challenging, and Sometimes Negative World. So thank you for joining us today, JoAnna.
It's my pleasure. Okay, I will just get this screen going here and get this slideshow on the way. On, do what you're supposed to do. Okay, I guess it's still not doing what it's supposed to do. There we are. So we're here tonight to talk about planting the seeds of happiness. And thank you, Catherine, for inviting me to do this. This is probably the most fun I have legally, is talking about happiness. It's fun for me. It's been such a long and incredible journey. And we've all been through a long and incredible journey. I started using this slide when I was unable to see my daughter and my 2 granddaughters. So to me, this signifies the fact that we've all come through a hard time. I still have not seen them, but I will see them next week. So I'm very, very excited about that. COVID has changed a lot of things. And for some people, it's given them the opportunity to go deeper into themselves and find new sources of happiness. And for others, there was just a sense of loss. And I think we're all coming back together now and trying to understand what's in front of us. What can we do? There is definitely light at the end of this tunnel. I studied with Dr. Martin Seligman, something that's called applied positive psychology. It's also called the science of happiness, the science of what goes right, and the science of high performance. And some have even called it the science of thrival. I just know that since this has come into my life about 17 years ago, my life has been measurably different. This is truly the science of flourishing. Up until 1998, all of the practices that were in psychology really were 80% focused on mental illness, not mental wellness. And when Dr. Seligman became president of the American Psychological Association, he decided he wanted to change that because he realized after 35 years of being a psychologist, in his words, he could get someone from a -5 to 0, but he had no idea how to take somebody that was 0, normal, and take them to +5. So he raised $40 million, and there we are. Now we have a new science, and is being studied alongside neuroscience to tell us how our brains and bodies and chemistries work well together. And you know, what we are discovering is that we have more control than we ever thought of our states of mind. We know that happy people have 65% more energy. I think that's reason alone to want to make sure we do everything we can to be happy. Happy people are more productive, 31% more productive, 3 to 10 times more creative. And in business, that translates in happy cultures to about a 300 to 400% innovation rate. So companies that want to really get the best out of their employees are investing in happy cultures. The thing I think is really important is that when we're in a state of happiness, we're 43% more adaptable to change. We're 44% more engaged in whatever we're doing. And of course, we know that optimists live 7 to 9 years longer than pessimists. So that's a darn good reason to pay attention. Happiness has a variety of different things it will do to us. It makes us smarter. It dials up the learning centers in the brain. It makes the right side of the brain and the left side of the brain communicate better together, so we have a more holistic outlook on things. We're able to see the big picture. When we're in a state of positive emotion, our memories work better as well. Happiness, positive emotions in general, make us healthier. When we're in that state of positivity, our bodies are pumping out those T cells that are so important to the immune system. Our bodies are pumping out endorphins. Our bodies are pumping out dopamine. Our bodies are pumping out oxytocin, which is known as the tend and befriend chemical. That makes us more socially adept. 9 out of 10 people report that they are more positive just being in the presence of other positive people. So it's quite contagious. And we're also finding out now that happiness actually makes us healthier because we tend to have larger networks. And when we need help, help is generally readily available. And happiness, there it goes, happiness, positive emotion, when we are experiencing it, we're more likely to achieve the upper levels of our potential when we're having that experience of positive emotions. Now, happiness isn't the only positive emotion, thank goodness. There are lots of them. Some of the other positive emotions, especially emotions like awe, are absolutely expansive. If you think of the last time that you were out in nature and saw something spectacular, you were most likely experiencing a sense of awe. But a positive emotion that makes you happy might be confidence or competency. Some people like the quieter positive emotions like serenity. Some people like positive emotions like passion or pride or inspiration or hope. So there's a wide range of positive emotions that we can dip into whenever we choose. You know, I think we were misinformed. We learned that we have these unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But as one of my teachers, cross-cultural anthropologist Angeles Arian, taught me, in Thomas Jefferson's day, the word pursuit actually meant practice. So maybe what our forefathers were telling us was we're not supposed to be chasing around after happiness. We're supposed to be practicing it. And that's really what this is all about, the practice of happiness. Happiness is a practice. It's a process, but not a place. It's a habit, and a really good one that we can get ourselves into. It's a skill that can be learned. For me, it's a work ethic, and I'll explain that as we go along. I'll explain why I have to work at this. It's a choice that physically changes your brain, because neurons that wire together fire together. So the more that you practice positive emotion or happiness, the more you will create new neural pathways in the brain, and the faster you will get to happiness in the future, because it physically is going to change your brain. It's like a muscle that you exercise. If you don't use it, you lose it. And it doesn't just feel good. Happiness is actually good for you. It's in business, it's being called the new productivity. And it actually is a competitive business strategy when we want to create happiness at work and do something deliberate to do that. It's a way of looking at the world that focuses on what's good, on what's right, on what are the kinds of what's going well. It's a way that we see the world. And as we train ourselves to do that, we get more goodness back. But happiness is not a vague state of mind. It's a specific, measurable state of the body where there's distinct brain activity, distinct heart rhythms, and a distinct body chemistry. Dr. Candace Pert, who unfortunately is not with us any longer, I've studied a lot of her work. She was the pioneer in helping us understand that emotions don't happen in the brain. Emotions happen in the body through the neuropeptide system. And without Candace, we would never have understood the molecules of emotion. You see, happiness is not a state of mind. It's a state of body-mind. We have receptors for the chemicals that we produce when we're happy all throughout our body. So every time you have a feeling, and that usually comes from a thought, you make a chemical. So when you're thinking about or feeling something good, you produce what we call the chemicals of calm. And those chemicals are going to turn on your parasympathetic nervous system. So those are chemicals like oxytocin and serotonin, which helps you sleep and tune you down a little bit. When you have thoughts or feelings of negativity, you create the chemicals of fear, and that turns on the sympathetic nervous system. Now, most of you know the sympathetic nervous system as the fight or flight system, and that's what happens when we get under too much stress. And we'll talk about that a little bit too. So it's either way, it's okay, except that our bodies were meant to spend more time in the parasympathetic mode than the sympathetic mode. And then, of course, because we're such good human beings, we create stories about everything. So first we have a feeling, and then we start talking about it. And when we talk to ourselves or talk to others in a positive way about what's going on, we create this upward spiral. And when we're in an upward spiral, we feel really good because the story gets better and better. But unfortunately, we live in a culture that's primarily negative. So lots of people and lots of television programs and lots of news programs use a downward spiral. So it gets bad, and then it gets worse, and then it gets worse, and then it gets worse, and then everybody chimes in, and boom, down we go. So we have to pay attention to what we're hearing in our heads to make sure that we are flipping ourselves over into that beautiful upward spiral. Now, I don't want to give negative emotions a bad name because they're part of the human experience. They are important, and they do play an important role in our lives. They move us to change things. They ground us in reality. They help us get out of danger fast if we have to, and they focus our attention. So they're an important part of the human experience, and they're necessary for our growth. However, we need significantly less negative emotions than we do positive emotions to keep us in a healthy state. We have too many negative emotions, which puts us in our primal brain. Whenever we're in the primal brain, we're shutting down the front portion of the brain. So those negative emotions can certainly cause stress. It causes that fight, flight, or freeze response, which our body doesn't want to stay in very, very long because it wasn't programmed to do that. This is a response that was given to us that we have to get out of danger fast, and then we're supposed to let it go. But we don't always do that. If you spend more than 5 minutes in a negative emotion like anger, for instance, it's going to reduce your immunity for up to the next 6 hours. That's a long time to have your immune system not functioning, because when you're in that fight, flight, or freeze mode, your body doesn't need to do a lot of things like digest your food or worry about the immune system. The body is programmed to just get out of there fast. So when we spend too much time in negative emotions, there are negative consequences. It increases your heart rate. It shuts down the front part of your brain, which is the creative part of the brain, and it narrows everything to what's wrong in the environment, because that's what you need to see if you really were about to be attacked by a saber-toothed tiger. And here's the thing that changed my life. We have a happiness set point. It's kind of like a weight set point. So if you have ever woken up one day and looked in the mirror and go, how did I end up looking so much like my mother? Or one of those things that we say to each other, that's like a weight set point. When we have a happiness set point, it's like an emotional thermostat. And we adapt to things. It gives us this adaptation response. So when you first search for happiness out there, when you say, I'm going to be happy when I get those red shoes, or I'm going to be happy when I get the house in the suburbs, or I'm going to be happy when I get a new car, or I'm going to be happy when I get a new boyfriend, all of those things, right? That's happiness out there. That's happiness outside of yourself. And reality is you will be happy when you get those things, but the happiness won't last. Because unless happiness comes from the inside, happiness will not last, because our bodies will adapt to it just like your body adapts to 98.6 or somewhere thereabouts as being the normal temperature. So you can get hot or you can get cold, but you adapt. Same thing with your happiness. So when you're happy when, watch those phrases, when I'm happy when, you can be sure that if it's outside yourself, the happiness will perhaps happen, but it will not be lasting, because the body wants to keep that level steady. And here's the thing that changed my life. It's about 50% genetic. 50% of your happiness, thereabouts. Now they're saying, is it 40? Is it 45? Is it 50? Doesn't matter. About 50% of it is genetic. And if you have more than one child, you may have noticed, or if you're more than one sibling, you may have noticed every one of those babies comes out one way or the other. Some babies are happy and easy and get a specific kind of response from the parent, and some not so much. Sonia Lyubomirsky wrote about that in her book, The How of Happiness. She had that lovely picture on the front of a pie, so I created my own pie. I'm Italian, so of course it's a piece of pie. 50% of your happiness comes from your genetics. 10% are going to come from your circumstances, where you live, how healthy you are, where you work, how much money you make, whether or not you're married, whether or not you have a good social system around you, whether or not you have some kind of faith in something outside of yourself. But 40% of your happiness actually comes from your habitual thoughts, feelings, actions, things that are in your voluntary control. So let's participate a little bit here and think about, if you want to increase your happiness by increasing habits, thoughts, feelings, and actions, what would you do? How can you create more happiness in your life by changing those habits, thoughts, or feelings? Now, if you want to type that right into the chat box, if you don't feel like talking with us tonight, we'll have another opportunity to do that. So if you want to, hi Sharon, I see you just wrote something in here. Thank you for joining us. Does everybody know how to access the chat box? So let's share something that you might do that might be a new habit or something you do now, something that's in your voluntary control that impacts whether or not you're happy. Well, I'll start it off. Oh, the coffee. Okay, that's good. As long as it's not too much coffee. And this one that we haven't done for too long when my typing's suffering tonight, going out with friends. Going out with friends, sitting in the sun. Oh gosh, that's such a wonderful thing to do, as long as you remember your sunscreen. What else can you do? What habit can you change? What new thought? You can dance. Oh, dancing is wonderful because you're moving your entire body. You're moving the energy around, and you're moving the and you can get more of a positive. I love the word affirmation. Walking, affirmation, diverting my thoughts to something positive. Listening to Pema Chodron, she is wonderful. I love Pema Chodron. What else? What are a couple more things that you might share? Things that you do, things that are in your voluntary control that you want to make sure you're doing a little bit of every day, because you know stretching, absolutely stretching is wonderful. I love that, walking and affirmations. I actually record my affirmations on my cell phone, and then I can listen to them while I'm walking. So I'm doing two things at once, which always makes me happy. What else? Can we have a couple more participants in here? Habits, thoughts, feelings. How about reading a good book? How about the movies you watch? How about, are you watching something that's making you feel good, or are you watching something that's making your body produce cortisol because it's scary and it's got lots of screechy noises? How about hobbies? How about cooking?
Okay.
Huh?
Oh,
Hi.
nowadays I get my little thing with I take few classes. You want to know what I'm taking now? The
Yes.
Seed of Happiness. Let's see, because I came a few minutes late. Something about Seed of Happiness. So I learned something. 50% of our happiness comes from genetic, 10% comes from environment, 40% it's a habit, thought, feeling, action. So she's asking, what can you do by yourself to help you?
Okay, well, thank you.
Let me
that's
tell
one thing
you
you
that
can see.
library has wonderful program.
Wonderful.
So it's from Harvard Field Library. It's on Zoom, but it's really helpful.
I think what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you to mute right now so we can go on to the next
Okay.
slide. And you did something though that I want to bring
The
up.
one you usually go with?
Laughter is something that's really important. So anything you can do, get into a situation with your friends, or I watched a TED Talk today on laughter. So anything that you can do in that habits, thoughts, and feelings category, anything that you can do voluntarily, you have control over your amount of happiness. That's what we just did. We didn't go into the chat box, but we know, scientifically proven, that certain activities, when practiced with intention and attention, can absolutely alter your happiness set point. One for sure is meditation, and the other is exercise, because of the chemicals that it changes in your body. When your body is exercising, it's producing endorphins, it's producing dopamine, and those chemicals are so important for coping with change, because if you want to be adaptable, you have to be producing those chemicals like endorphins in your body. The hard part is that we think 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. And according to the people that count these things, 80% of those, 90% of those are the same as yesterday, and 80% of those are negative. So how can we become more aware of when our mind is monkeying around with us? We call it monkey mind. Where is your monkey mind going? So when you catch yourself thinking a negative thought, stop before you go into the downward spiral, which is what most of us will do. And you can ask yourself the question, wait a minute, where would I rather be? Would I rather take myself into a downward spiral, or would I rather be somewhere else? You have to have control over your mind, because otherwise it leads us astray. 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day, most of them are negative. So start paying attention to where your thought patterns are going. So you see, when you have a negative emotion, it sticks to your brain sort of like Velcro does. This is the work of Dr. Rick Hansen. And he says our negative emotions are like Velcro, and they just cling on. And that makes sense, right? Because we have to remember things that are bad for us. But positive emotions are like Teflon, and they slip right off. So in order to balance them, we need more positive emotions than negative emotions. Now, when we experience those negative emotions, that can shut our immune system down for up to 6 hours. To me, this is the fact that we all need to know in the age of COVID and the age of these communicable diseases. We don't want our immune system shut down. Positive emotions can build that immune system for up to 6 hours. So really, that becomes a choice. When you find yourself ruminating on a negative experience, remember that you are now impacting your immune system and your ability to stay healthier. Dr. Barbara Fredrickson at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, who's another teacher of mine, has come up with what she calls the 3-to-1 tipping point. In order to tip from languishing to flourishing, we need 3 times more positive emotions than negative emotions. And if we want high performance in life, we actually need 5 times more. So the quest is, how can we train our brains to be happier? Those are neurons that are firing together that will ultimately wire together. So let's try this again. We'll open up. Let's see if we can just open up your microphone for a moment and share one thing that you're grateful for, and very briefly, why you're grateful for it. And as you're feeling that, as you're sharing that, see if you can feel it, because the body doesn't know the difference between something that's vividly imagined and something that is happening in the moment. So feel the gratitude for something. I'll start off by saying, I am really grateful that I have a ticket to Durham, North Carolina next week. So I'm going to get to see my family. And boy, that makes me feel good. Who would like to share something they're grateful for? And very briefly, why?
Okay, I'll say something. I've done a lot of traveling, and I am really grateful every day for clean drinking water that comes out of my tap.
Wow, that's wonderful. And do you feel it while you're drinking the water?
Well, I don't like wasting water because I know
Right.
many places don't have it.
And who is this speaking? Because without the visual, I can't, it doesn't tell me.
This is Renee.
Renee, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Who else wants to share something they're grateful for and why? Catherine, how about you? Something you're grateful for and why you're grateful.
I guess I'm grateful for my family. You know, I have my my husband, and my son is still home with us. Unfortunately, he got a little hampered, had to stay home from the pandemic, but I'm grateful to have them with me, and we're all healthy and employed, and life is okay.
That's wonderful, but that's wonderful. Yes, something to be grateful for. How about you, Sharon? Can I pick on you?
I am grateful for good health for all of us.
Wonderful. Thank you. Now, there's somebody here I just identified by the name iPhone. Or Mary or Marianne or Randy want to pop in here?
Hi, this is Mara.
Mara, hi.
Hi. I'm actually grateful for the library for having something called Gale.com available so that I can take online classes throughout this past year, and it's been amazing.
Oh, I'm glad you're taking advantage of that.
Thank you.
I am also grateful for the library. My sister lives in your neighborhood, and that's all she ever talks about is the library and how wonderful it is. So yes, thank you. And I see we have some questions here. We will get to the questions, I promise.
Well, and Mary says she's grateful to be here after coming through so many medical challenges.
Yeah, really. And boy, that's when many of us learn to be grateful after we've had a challenge, after we have a challenge. That's when so many of us feel grateful. Anybody else care to share with us tonight? An opportunity to feel grateful and share it with others. Okay, well then we will move on. And if you want to pop in later, let me know. So I'm going to leave you, I think, with just 2-3 positivity practices tonight. That's what I do. But if you don't have one already, create a structured gratitude practice. The most popular way is to keep a journal and write down the things you are grateful for daily. Another variation on that, if you're trying to create things in your life, is to keep a gratitude journal, but be grateful for things that haven't even happened yet. Be grateful for the things you want to happen in your life and write about them as if they have already happened. That way you're priming your body and your mind to go and look for these things in the environment. Another way to feel really good is to send one appreciation email every morning to a family member, to a friend, to a colleague, to an employee. Just send one email every morning to say, I appreciate you because. That makes you feel really good, and it makes the other person feel really good. You see, our emotions, our bodies are programmed to have contagious emotions. And something that I found mind-boggling years ago was when I found out that when you do a kindness for another person, your body begins producing serotonin. Their body begins producing serotonin. That's that beautiful rest and digest hormone. But if someone else happens to observe you doing that kindness, their body begins producing serotonin too, which lends me to believe that we are supposed to be social creatures being kind to one another, because all we have to do is witness kindness and we turn the faucet on serotonin. Without enough serotonin in your body, you don't sleep well. Write a gratitude letter. This is what's called an evidence-based practice, and I learned this when I studied with Marty Seligman. He encouraged all of us to write a letter to someone we had never thanked before about some part they played in our lives, and then to make it even better, to go deliver that gratitude letter in person. So we might be able to do that soon. Even if you're not able to deliver it in person, mail it and then pick up the phone and then explain to that person why you are so grateful for them. It will make them feel good. It will make you feel good. And you get about a 2-week burst in happiness when you do that. So that's a cool thing to do. And just tell people what you appreciate about them. Just say, I really appreciate the fact that you listen so well. Or I really appreciate the fact that you're always asking me whether I need something and you're willing to help out. Just that practice of always speaking out loud what you appreciate makes your body happier, makes your body produce the good parasympathetic chemicals, and the body of the person that you're talking to. That's how interconnected we are. And optimism is a way of looking at the world. So optimists actually live with hope, faith, and joy. They are healthier, they are more creative, and they are open to more possibility. Optimism can be learned. They have more fun, lower blood pressure, lower cortisol, and fewer heart attacks. And as I said earlier, they live 7 to 9 years longer. That's pretty important. Optimism is a way we explain the world to ourselves. And you can just begin to start listening to how you explain things. So we had a discussion when we all came in tonight about how beautiful the weather in New York is. And there's 2 of us here from Florida, and how fickle that Florida weather is. So down here, you pretty much have to learn not to get too attached to the weather. And the people that do best are the people that say things like, well, we really needed this rain, even though I wanted to have a picnic. We really needed this rain. So it's how you explain things to yourself. I always like to say that a pessimistic person visiting Florida will get crazy when it rains. Oh my gosh, every time I come to Florida, it rains. My whole vacation is spoiled. And we all know people like that. They globalize their statements and they make a big deal out of what is something that they could say, well, we needed the rain. Let's go check out the new museum. So it's a way of explaining the world to yourself so that bad things, when they happen, are temporary, they're very specific, and you just don't take them personally. That's a way to live 7 to 9 years longer. I'm clicking away here. What's going on? Oh, there we go. When we are in that state of appreciation, our heart rate variability actually changes. I've studied with heartmath.org. They are a research institute out in California. And this is one of the very first things that they teach you, is that when we're in our typical moving around, getting everything done state, we're kind of frustrated. Our heart rate variability, the space in between the beats, is kind of jagged. But when we slow down, when we breathe from in and out of our hearts, when we go to a state of appreciation, our heart rate variability actually changes. Now, because I'm still pretty much, even close to 30 years living in Florida, I still have a little of the New Yorker left in me. So sometimes I get a little bit too hyper, get a little bit too get her done, get her done, get her done energy. And when I need to bring myself down from that, I actually have a little thing that I clip on my ear, and it clips on the phone here, and I can watch my vibe of appreciation happen so that I can breathe deeply until I see that beautiful sine wave, and I can keep track of it. So I'm training myself to bring myself into the state of appreciation, which, by the way, other people can feel, because we have an electromagnetic field around our body that other people can feel. Now, you all know this because sometimes you walk in a room and you know somebody's just had an argument in that room, or sometimes you walk into someone's home and it just feels beautiful because the energy is so positive. So the electromagnetic field of the heart is 5,000 times more powerful than the electromagnetic field of the brain. We're very head-centered in our culture as opposed to heart-centered. But the heart is actually more powerful. So when we go to our heart, when we feel that happiness deeply, that's what we're vibrating out into the world. And that makes other people feel very, very comfortable. By the way, I teach this to people in the business world as well. I teach salespeople about this because if you've ever been in a sales position, you know that when you're sitting in your car waiting to go see your client, potential client, or if you're in a nonprofit, you're waiting to go ask somebody for money, we get nervous. And if we don't do something to take control of our own state, we walk into our client feeling very jittery. The client feels it completely. They don't know what they're feeling. They just know that it makes them feel uncomfortable. So I actually have salespeople sitting in the car, putting their hand over their heart and going into a state of appreciation. And guess what happens? Sales go up because they're vibrating something differently. They are broadcasting an energy that's welcome, that's warm, that's positive in nature. So ask yourself, especially before you walk into your home, walk into a friend's home, before you walk into your job, what am I broadcasting today? What am I broadcasting today? It's a good practice to do. So check your state. Check the state of your energy before you walk into your workplace or back into your home or into your teenager's bedroom. Think about what you're thinking about. Is what you're thinking about positive or negative? Is it optimistic? Is it pessimistic? Is it energy gaining? Is it something that other people are, it's going to help other people feel good about? Or is it energy draining? If you're thinking about something negative, something that's bothering you, then that's energy draining and it sucks the life out of the room. I used to have a fairly high pressure job when I lived in New York. And I would come home at night and talk about energy draining. I was an energy suck by the time I got home at night because the activities during the day didn't allow me to gain energy. So I came home drained, which is one of the reasons why I do what I do in the world today, because I don't want people to come home drained. I want the activities at work to be so fulfilling that when they come home, they are bursting with excitement and positive energy because they've had a good day at work. There's a spillover effect of everything. And we want to create a positive spillover in our lives, not a negative one. So you're broadcasting your emotions, even when you don't know it. So become aware of it. Notice and pretend that you can just turn the dial on your mood to a more optimistic and uplifting channel. Actually putting your hand out there as if you're turning a dial on something or pushing your finger on the phone and watching the volume go up. These are very useful devices for saying, I'm gonna raise my energy level, because we can trick the brain into a lot of different things. You see, the brain doesn't understand the difference between something that's real and something that's vividly imagined. So when you vividly imagine the good stuff, the body starts producing those happy chemicals again. So this really boils down to, what kind of chemicals am I producing in my body? Are these the chemicals that are going to give me a long, happy, healthy life? Or are these the chemicals that are going to wear me down and narrow my focus? Let's just try this right now for each other. If you focus on your heart, if you take your hand and put it on your heart, what that does is it starts the flow of oxytocin in your body. That's known as the love hormone, or the tend and befriend chemical. And if you focus on your heart and just radiate love to someone you care about, it doesn't have to actually be a person, but a person, a pet, a place in nature, just radiate a little love. Radiate a little love to the water that you drink that's clean and that comes through your tap. And as you're breathing in and out slowly, you'll feel a sense of patience come over you. And allow that sense of patience and that sense of ease to come over you. And as you do that, just radiate out love to everybody that showed up tonight. There's 10 of us here, and we can just radiate love on each other. So from the energy of my body to the energy of your bodies, from your bodies to each other, just radiate out this beautiful feeling of love. And when you do that, you're going to start feeling pretty darn good. And you can do this in a traffic jam. You can do this before walking into a supermarket. And it's been a long time since I was in a supermarket in New York, but boy, I do remember that parking lot at Whole Foods is really difficult to navigate. So this practice is so handy and so easy to do. And sometimes it's these simple things that we forget. So you can set a timer on your phone. You can put a Post-it note on the wall. You can do something to remind yourself that this is a practice that's going to bring your body into a state of wellness and create more wellness around you. So when you plant these little seeds of happiness that I shared with you tonight, you get more energy. You become more creative. You're actually more social. You're more adaptable to change. Oh my goodness, I have social down there twice. Well, you must be very more social because I've got it down there twice. You're more joyful, more attractive to people, and in the end, you become more abundant. You see, when you practice happiness as a regular thing, you begin to grow a flourishing life. Doesn't that look like a home that you might see in Huntington? I love driving around Huntington and just looking at the beautiful homes, and this picture reminded me of that. And as Dr. Wayne Dyer used to tell us, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at changed. So I always end with a question, is there a return on happiness? There surely is. More creative, more innovative, more resilient, more cooperating, more health, more meaning and appreciation, more empathy, more flexibility, more growth. There's no downside to paying attention to where you're putting your energy and your focus, because what you focus on expands. And this is my cute little book, 54 Ways to Stay Positive in a Changing, Challenging, and Sometimes Negative World. Wanted to bring that to your attention. That's just a fun little thing. And here's my contact information. If you want to contact me in any way, shape, or form, I've got websites. I'm on LinkedIn. I don't do Twitter too much. And my email is there, joanna@returnonhappiness.com. So since every question begins with a question, let's ask me some questions. Oh, Sharon says her apologies. She needs to leave for dinner with her family. Well, that's a wonderful, she did a wonderful thing before going. She'll have things she can bring to her family. Who's got a question? Somebody had a question right in the beginning. Oh, how can we encourage this in teenagers? What a great question, Mara. I would suggest that there are lots of books out there where this is accessible to kids. You can do it the same way that I wrote that book. You can start asking other people what makes them happy, and then you can start composing your own list. That book started as I was doing a seminar in New Jersey. And a client stood up from the back of the room and she said to me, "Joanna, what do you do to stay positive in a negative world?" And I had to think on my feet. I came up with 2 or 3 ways. And then I said, I was on retainer with that client. So every month, this is how far back it goes. Every month I sent them an audio tape. And every month I would give them another 13 ways. So a fun way to do it is start collecting your own ways to be positive, even in a world that sometimes appears to be negative. So I would engage my teenagers to do some kind of a project. I would put a gratitude jar on the kitchen table and ask everybody to write down something they're grateful for at the beginning of a meal or at the end of the meal or at the end of the day. I would ask your teenagers, instead of asking how was school today, I would ask the question, what did you do today that made you proud? Because that's going to get them focused on talking about their strengths. And when we talk about our strengths, we feel good and we perform better. So I would engage them in that. I would engage them in there's an exercise called 3 Good Things and Why, and that's sharing with others or sharing in a journal 3 good things that happened to you that day and why they happened, or expand on them a little bit. So you just don't say, you know, I ran into a friend at the park. You might say, I ran into a friend at the park and we had a really engaging conversation. Or a kid might say, we had a really fun conversation. Or we decided to take a walk or play basketball. So I think we have to focus the attention of our teenagers on looking for the good. So you could ask the question, what's going well and why? They're kind of easy to train if you get the knack of it, to keep refocusing their attention. I have a newly minted teenager. I missed her birthday in April, but I will be with her next week. So I'm interested in seeing how she's changed, because I like using a lot with the language, because how we speak is very often where our brains go. So when we focus on the negative, that's what we get. And I think they know that. But I have always done my best to make sure that they know what's acceptable and what's not. And I travel with a no whining zone. So when I get to their house, my little granddaughter now puts up a sign. She made a sign that says, this is a no whining zone. And it comes out when I go to their house, because I don't really want to hear that whining. So they don't whine when I'm there, because the whole house turns into a no whining zone. So you can have fun with kids. Does that, Mara, does that answer your question? Is Mara still with us? Mara?
Yes, I typed in, sorry, I typed in that, yes, that was helpful. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
What happened to my chat box over here? Okay, good. Can you add anything to that? Was there something you'd like to add to that?
If it's a way to bring things in naturally, not as excuse the word, like gimmick-y,
Right.
particularly for older kids.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
So, you know, I like the way that you have the sort of changing the framing of the questions
Mhm.
that you're asking, because that's more of a natural conversational.
And there's 2 kinds of questions. There's empowering questions and disempowering questions. So when I look in the mirror and say, why am I so fat? That's a disempowering question. But when I look in the mirror and say, what can I do to be happier with the way I look? That evokes a different response in the brain. So just teaching kids to watch the kind of questions, the whole brain runs on questions. So just teaching kids to ask more empowering questions is helpful.
Well, it's first teaching us as parents to
That's true.
remember it's so hard in the moment to do that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so, but that's absolutely right. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for that contribution. I appreciate it. Does anybody else have a question?
Well, Renee has a question in the chat. She asks, why does sharing negative feelings with a friend take you out of the negative spiral?
Well, when you're talking about if you're talking, because we have to vent. So there's a difference here. Thank you, Renee, for bringing that up. When you share a negative feeling with a friend and you're able to let go of it, you can come out of the negative spiral. But when you share a negative feeling with a friend and you're sharing it for the second time or the third time, or you're reinforcing each other, it takes you deeper into the spiral. So when you have, in the book, I talk about something called dial-a-wallow, because every once in a while, you just need to do that. So you can set something up with a friend that says, okay, I need to vent for 5 minutes. Can I have 5 minutes where I can say anything I want? And you just tell me when my 5 minutes is up. And then you vent away, be as negative as you want. And then somebody says, okay, your time's up. That's very helpful, because you're saying, okay, I need to let go of this. And women especially need to share. So we are a little different in that respect. The problem becomes when we go down that rabbit hole by ruminating on those negative things. Does that make sense, Renee?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good, thanks. Yeah, that's a tricky one. That's a tricky one because we do need to express some of the negative things that are happening. We just need to not stay on them. I've been experiencing quite a lot of back pain over the past few days, and it's been challenging not to make sure I tell that to everybody I talk to, because it's so present in my body. So I'm trying very hard not to dwell on it. And so when someone says, "How do you feel?" I might say, and I've said it a few times, I'm really being challenged right now. And I'm being challenged because in addition to, I mean, look what I do for a living. So I want to make sure that I can rise above it. At the same time, I'm really very human and it hurts. So it's really a matter of how we learn to talk to ourselves and others to stay in that positive place. Who else has got a question they'd like to ask? Okay, no questions. Who's going to go out and buy a gratitude jar and put it on their table or their counter or their credenza? That is such a fun thing to do. I'll give you another fun thing to do, and I've got a couple of the jars right here. When you're having a party, get a bunch of little index, anything that's colorful, a bunch of little index cards, and cut them into little strips and put different color pens out and ask everybody to leave a happy thought before they leave your home. I do this a lot at birthday parties, and people really love it because they get an opportunity to give you a birthday wish, and everybody sees everybody else putting it in the jar, and then they put it in the jar, and then the birthday person gets to go home with a jar full of good wishes that you can pick up and pull those wishes out anytime you want. So there's lots of these little practices that just make you feel good and reinforce that feeling. So if you want to stay young and you want to stay healthy, some of these practices are really helpful. Well, I want to say thank you to everybody here. I am grateful that you came out before dinner, after dinner, during dinner, wherever you are. I'm really grateful to Catherine for inviting me here. And we have a recording. So those people who couldn't make it can get a recording, which is great. And I'm just very grateful, Catherine, and grateful to everybody that came tonight. And I wish you well.
Well, and thank you for joining us and sharing your expertise and your passion for this topic. I think we all need a little boost right about now. So thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.